Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining me on this talk. I never thought that one day I'd be asked to do a talk as an old lady of mining in what has been a pretty challenging career at times, and ruminating, see, old lady speak, about this talk. I thought we're still having the same conversations around inclusivity we did when we started working as a naive geologist. Did you know that there were more women working in mining 200 years ago than there are now? So I'm sure women have been talking about inclusivity for more years than I've been around. But I really want to talk about something different and about the perfect mining world that I would like it to be for women. But of course, we need to discuss where we are in order to know what we want. So the title of this talk, which you sang, didn't you? This Spice Girls song came out in 1996, when South Africa was in the midst of all kinds of changes, and we felt we could ask for anything we wanted. So the following list is my own, and no mine workers were hurt in the making of it. The first thing on my list would be no more formal or concealed organizational practices that maintain discrimination and conscious or unconscious bias. When we look at attracting women to the mining industry, there shouldn't be different standards for different people during hiring. It should be about finding the best people by the best people in the recruiting process, including both men and women who know the technical and emotional values of the company. But it's human nature to be drawn to people who are similar. And so people recruit others like themselves, meaning that in the male domination of mining, it leads to a self-perpetuating problem. But what about quotas, I hear you ask? So many countries like South Africa and Norway have legislated quotas. And having legislation has highlighted discrimination in all forms and the needs of women and other people in mining. And this focus has led to some adjustments in the South African mining workplace that could be linked to new legislations. For example, change facilities, personal protection and equipment, recruitment strategies, BEE policies, women-only core business teams, mentoring and support structures. I think a quota-driven mentality can actually be destructive, as legislation drives a direct focus on a gender culture in workplace and not on diversity culture. The bottom line, though, is that gender diversification is good for business. So removing discrimination against women will mean that companies utilize the whole labor pool. They don't overlook highly productive, effective workers, and they avoid driving up prices on the labor they do use. But what about policies once women have been employed? It seems fairly obvious that in male-dominated industries, men are more likely than women to make and enforce workplace policies through their greater numbers, but also because they hold more senior positions. So let's remove these male bias management strategies and bring in strong, visible, and effective policies geared towards accommodating both men and women's physical needs, change management strategies, and practices to create female integrated cultures, and provide appropriate emotional support and mentorship. Workplaces will have to become more flexible to keep up with the demands of the inclusive workplace. And I do think that the COVID pandemic has proved just how adjustable we all can be. Women experience work quite differently from men. Generally, a desire for status, power, and social comparisons drive men, or so I've heard. On the other hand, a desire to do a good job and contribute to organizational functioning motivate women. And while men define career success in terms of promotion and financial progression, women construct success on a range of internal criteria like achievement, accomplishment, personal recognition, and influence. So strategies that aim to develop women's careers are likely to fail unless organizations attempt to understand more clearly how women perceive their career success. And let's do away with wage disparity. The Internal Labour Organization has had conventions for equal pay and non-discriminatory employment practices in place for over 60 years. Despite this, the gender pay gap is still very much a reality, and I'm sure all my female colleagues will attest to this. South Africa has various pieces of legislation aimed at preventing gender discrimination, yet the country has a median gender pay gap of about 20%. In Botswana, a man earns an average of 30% more than women. In the DRC, it's 57%, while in Ghana, it's 221% more. Providing women with appropriate equipment, PPE, changing washroom and toilet facilities, especially underground and surface production areas, seems a simple thing to achieve. And new technologies will improve occupational health and safety conditions. New technologies are also moving workers away from the rock face. So machine workers can now work remotely. Sorry, I'm just going to start that paragraph again. And new technologies will improve occupational health and safety conditions. New technologies are also moving workers away from the rock face. Machine operators can now work remotely from the safety of control rooms on the surface. This improves access to jobs for women who are banned from working underground in some countries. And for instance, workers can digitally visualize underground operations from remote control rooms, reducing the exposure to risks and hazards. What is harder to control is verbal abuse and sexual harassment, which are still very common. Female miners are also still pressurized into giving sexual favors to their male colleagues, as there are remnants of cultural legacies where females are regarded as an object owned by men. Whether we have systems in place, such as the buddy system, to ensure that women don't work alone, surveillance cameras, and biometric identity turnstiles at entrances to women's changing facilities, or whether we train people to make clear definitions of sexual harassment, having a safe working environment should go without saying. Within male-dominated industries, the cultural view is that the man's way of doing things is the norm, meaning that leadership is equated to masculine communication methods like assertion, independence, competitiveness, and confidence. On the other hand, the qualities of deference, inclusivity, collaboration, and cooperation, which are associated with feminine modes of communication, are linked to subordinate roles rather than to leadership. Even something as simple, or not, as teamwork is viewed differently from the different sexes. For men, it apparently means letting the leader lead and being a good follower. Women, on the other hand, interpret it as contributing and speaking up, the exact opposite of what is required in the male version. Because of this difference, women are often criticized as not having people skills. They're excluded from the old boys' clubs and upper management inner circles because it is believed they do not know how to behave and do not understand the rules. In other words, they're unpredictable and difficult to control. To fit into this world and be successful, women often behave in ways that are unnatural to them by taking on aggressive male characteristics and competitive interactional styles, which leads to all kinds of emotional disconnects. Organizations need to legitimize women's characteristics, natural behaviors, and values, and allow them to shine in their own right. And of course, there are physical differences. Women aren't just smaller versions of men. And in some extent, the male domination of the mining industry does make sense. Underground mine work is particularly strenuous. It takes place in cramped and dangerous conditions, at temperatures that test the limit of human endurance, with heavy machinery and with scant facilities. And on average, women have about 50% of a male's upper body strength and 3/4 of a male's leg strength. So drills and other equipment are very heavy and historically designed for manipulation by men. A woman's lifting strength is 2/3 of that of a man. So because men are also taller than women, everything from spades to drills is a bit too big and a bit too long for the average female employee. So unless equipment is significantly redesigned, it is to be expected that women put in more effort to produce the same work. With greater muscular and skeletal strain, and possibly injury may result from women using this machinery. But women can and do get the job done. As already mentioned, new technologies are introducing changes to the mining landscape as they redesign the work environments and organization of the workplace. South Africa's mining industry and the rest of Africa will continue to evolve over the coming decades, eventually transitioning into a mechanical, modernized and automated industry staffed by a highly skilled workforce, and women will really then come into their own. Many of the problems women face when pursuing a mining career are those which arise due to women's traditional role as the primary caregiver. it can be difficult for females to achieve a good work-life balance because of the industry's constraints in terms of flexibility, remote site work, and juggling childcare with often long, unsociable hours and expectations of overtime. There is also the general acceptance that performance equates with longer working hours, and staying on the job longer than expected may impress managers. This sidelines many women with family obligations who simply can't be in the office all the time. These problems arise irrespective of the worker's gender. But since a higher percentage of women assume the role of primary caregiver, so of course, these issues are more visible for them. Social support facilities such as creche and childcare institutions, family units to allow for family life balance, and medical facilities suitable for women would go a long way in addressing these issues. Women still view this male-dominated culture as hard to change, where women are only tolerated by colleagues and management. The glass ceiling, where career development is hindered by leadership, is still very much in place. A woman might not have as well a developed network as her male counterparts. This feeds into the cycle where women are not appointed to higher positions due to a lack of networks, which leads to a lack of women in senior management positions, continuing low levels of female recruitment and retention. There is also a lack of support and protection from the already existing male and female employees, unions, and employee representative groups. And there is still the old boys club feeling, where advancement is determined by gender and chauvinism is rampant. I look forward to the day when, referring to the old boys club, people are reminded of polo playing, cocktail drinking, colonial old fellows, and absolutely nothing to do with gender. Gender stereotypes still cast men as breadwinners and workers, and women as homemakers. Women in mining not only contribute to the available workforce that directly feeds the economy, but they also drive changing the culture of mining. In particular, they challenge the gender stereotypes that portray mining as being suitable for men only, and therefore their presence contributes to the promotion of gender equity in the industry. But men still have the power to stigmatize women, to sustain stereotypes about them as inferior workers. In particular, supervisors use stereotypes to justify women's assignments to jobs in support of and in service of men. These processes foster the stereotyping of jobs and lead to the division of labor. Retaining their confidence and self-esteem is a constant challenge for women because many male colleagues continue to undermine women's capabilities by painting them as incompetent. You know the saying, a woman has to work twice as hard as her male counterparts to prove she can do the job. And if it fails, it reflects on all women. And women can be their own worst enemies. They also have stereotypical gender role expectations for themselves. They include questioning their own competence and gender role ideologies that lead to them feeling inadequate and having low self-esteem. And they are often reluctant to progress into the more intensely competitive male roles because of these negative self-perceptions. Rather, they opt for softer roles while remaining in male-dominated environments, full circle to stereotypical gender roles. And in conclusion, what would my perfect world look like? Where women are welcomed for their abilities and differences, where they participate totally, and their intellects, talents, and skills are fully used. Think of the products developed, the technologies created, companies founded, and discoveries made. What answers would women find for the mining industry's most pressing problems? And now that we've tackled the perfect mining environment, let's make the whole world more women-friendly, because let's face it, we still live in a man's world. From crash test dummies to the size of a smartphone, it's all designed for and scaled to men. Although this list of wishes for a perfect world is my own, I drew inspiration from many reports and articles, and I thank the authors. And thank you for listening.